the Clippers are struggling, man. They are currently 8-13 after a 4-0 start to the season. So which means that they have basically won a total of 4 games more since that point. And what's the reason for this? Like, why are they struggling? The reason basically to me is, first of all, their star players are injured. Blake Griffin has a sprained MCL, Patrick Beverley has a torn meniscus, and he's out for the season. So that's a big loss because Patrick Beverley was supposed to be their glue guy. He's supposed to be their defensive anchor. He should have been their energizer, but now he's out for the season, so he's a big loss. They lost Danilo Gallinari. Milos Teodosic has plantar fasciitis, so he's also out. So they are basically down their key star players. And we all expected the Clippers to be a solid team. We thought they started off really well. We thought, okay, they may do something in the Western Conference, maybe a playoff team without CP3. And then all these injuries came to play. And now they're in a position where they may not even make the playoffs if this streak keeps going. So yeah, so they're missing all these star players. They're also just not performing well as a team. I mean, they are 17th offensively and 19th defensively, and they are 28th in assists. And I blame most of this stuff on the coaching. Obviously, I feel like Doc Rivers was a respected coach. I feel like he's someone who was a good coach, but I just feel like he's more of an old school style of a coach. He's someone who is meant for that old school mentality where if you got a star player, you feed your stars and your stars sort of carry you to the finish line. And the assist number really shows it. Also, it doesn't help at the fact that they lost some of their playmakers, but that's no excuse for this team not to move the ball. And I also blame part of this to Blake Griffin, because he shouldn't be doing all of this. He shouldn't be handling the ball and being the number one playmaking option. He should be the number one ball handler on this team. So there's that. 17 offensively, 19 defensively. They're just not doing well. Like, this team, we expected a little bit more out of them. We expected Blake to go to that next level, but he just hasn't. And this team isn't doing well on either end of the floor. And finally, they just have a lack of personnel. This team, like I mentioned, without Griffin, Beverley, Gallinari, and Teodosic, they are basically a shitty team. That's like the best way I can put it. They're not great at any position. They have nobody. The only guy who I believe has some credibility on their team is Lou Williams and DeAndre Jordan. Those are the 2 guys on this roster currently who have some credibility. Everybody else are basically scrubbed or just learning how to play in the NBA. So it leads to the question, with all this going on with the Clippers, all this negativity, all this bad stuff that is going on to a team that just hasn't been able to achieve the success that they've been trying to achieve for the last few years, should the Clippers blow this up and rebuild? Most people say yes, because there really is no point in trying to compete with a bad roster in a stacked Western Conference. I mean, I've been saying this for a while now. Like, if you're a team, especially in the Western Conference, who is middle of the pack, you have a couple of stars and you're in the middle, you're not really winning and stuff, then what's the point? Like, I get it, there's always the incentive to compete, and when you have a competitive team, you make more money, the teams make more revenue. But at the same time, what are you doing? Like, what are you competing for? You're competing for maybe a playoff spot at best. And even if you do make it to the playoffs, you're playing one of the better teams in the Western Conference, which is either the Warriors or the Spurs or the Rockets, and you're just gonna get swept or blown out in the first round of the playoffs. Like, is that really what you want to do? And to me, I just feel like the Clippers have just been such a big disappointment, especially with when they had CP3, Blake, and DeAndre. They were supposed to be a good team, and they just underwhelmed. They never made it to a conference finals, and they always got bounced out of the playoffs in underwhelming fashion, and they were also very injury prone as a team. So yeah, I also agree with what majority of the people are saying, that the Clippers should blow this roster up. They should rebuild. They should start moving forward from this whole era of Lob City. They're not Lob City anymore. They're just a city. So, and the Clippers, they have some good young talent on their team. In Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, Willie Reed. These are good players. But in order to maximize their rebuild chances, they need to trade their star players. they need to trade DeAndre Jordan or even get rid of Coach Doc Rivers, in my opinion. That would also help. Now, which leads to the question, DeAndre Jordan. The reason why I say DeAndre Jordan is because he, at this current moment, has the most value out of any of the guys. Blake is too injury prone and his contract is huge, because I honestly felt like the Clippers should have traded Blake in the offseason when they had the chance to do so, or even at the draft, they should have traded him. Why? Because you could have gotten some crazy value for Blake Griffin, and he would have been easier to move with an expiring deal rather than trading him, re-signing him to a huge contract where now you can't even move him without having to work some crazy deal out with 3 teams and stuff. So that's why I say DeAndre Jordan. And also DeAndre Jordan's deal is also expiring at the end of this year. So if teams are looking at on the fence, they can also use that as an incentive, thinking that DeAndre, if we even trade for him, we don't have to keep him, we don't have to re-sign him, we don't have to pay him a lot of money. So that's why I say DeAndre Jordan should be the primary option for the Clippers to trade away. Now, there are a few teams interested in DeAndre Jordan. It's the Raptors, the Wizards, the Bucks, and the Wolves. They are all interested in DeAndre Jordan's services. Now let's start with the Raptors. The problem with the Raptors is they may not be willing to give up one of their young pieces to make a deal. A potential deal for DeAndre Jordan would have to include Jonas Valanciunas. The Raptors have been trying to get rid of Jonas Valanciunas for a while. He just doesn't fit what they're trying to do. Now, obviously, I don't even think the Clippers want Jonas Valanciunas, but his contract is what makes this deal work financially. I would also throw in Lucas Nogueira, because the Raptors just have such an influx of big men that they need to let go of some of them. And if they're getting DeAndre Jordan, they gotta let go of somebody. And I feel that Lucas Nogueira, he's not going to get any minutes in Toronto, just because they have so much talent and so much depth with the emergence of Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam, and even Serge Ibaka now being such a good option at center. So this team just doesn't need all 4 centers on their roster. They need at least maybe 2, and then Ibaka would be the 3rd center. And also with this deal, I would throw in a 1st round pick. This should be enough to get DeAndre Jordan. Now, how will he help the Raptors? Well, he'll help the Raptors defensively, definitely. Him and Serge Ibaka would be a great combination, because they both are shot blocker, they both are interior presence, and they both are great at switching and, being able to guard multiple positions, and that's always useful in today's NBA. But the only problem that I find that the Raptors may have some concerns over is he may become a liability on the offensive end. Now, we know Jonas Valanciunas is a liability on the defensive end, but at least he's not a liability on the offensive end. At least if you give the ball to Jonas Valanciunas, he can do other things in the post. That's not something that DeAndre Jordan is good at. He's not someone who is known for his offensive skill set, and I think that might hurt the Raptors in the sense that they're already trying to revitalize their offense. They're trying to move the ball more, shoot more threes, and that's something just DeAndre Jordan doesn't do. But it's a trade-off. If you want to get rid of Jonas Valanciunas, you gotta get DeAndre Jordan and deal with his offensive struggles, but get his defense as well. So it's a trade-off, but I feel like the Raptors are on the fence about this one. I don't know if it's the right move, but also they may not want to pull the trigger at this point just to disrupt their chemistry, because they're already playing well as well. So we'll see what happens with the Raptors. Similar issues for the Wizards here, as they can use DeAndre Jordan. I think he'll be great with John Wall, Bradley Beal. He'll be a great complementary piece, but they may not want to give up some of the young assets to get him, as in Kelly Oubre Jr. for instance. The Wizards could use an interior presence like DeAndre. They're currently 11th defensively, so obviously DeAndre will help move them into the top 10, which is always a great deal for any team looking into getting into the playoffs, that they can have a top 10 offense and then top 10 defense, and he can fit nicely with John Wall in the pick and roll. But the only problem is that, do the Wizards want to give up either Kelly Oubre Jr. or Otto Porter? And I don't think they want to give up either of those guys, because the Wizards are already so thin on their bench, and these 2 guys are productive young pieces for them. So I feel like the Wizards just should not even consider this, unless they can get a deal maybe like what the Bucks did with Greg Monroe. They maybe, the Wizards would be a great option, but as far as trading away young pieces go, I don't think the Wizards will be willing to do that. Which brings me to the Bucks. The Bucks are just like the Raptors and the Wizards, as they don't want to give up a young piece in either Malcolm Brogdon or Thon Maker. However, the Bucks are most actively pursuing DeAndre Jordan, reportedly, and they did make a similar move for Eric Bledsoe, and it worked out for them. As in, I'm referring to the move where they traded away Greg Monroe and I believe a first or a second round pick for Eric Bledsoe. So if the Bucks can work out a move like that, then why not? Because DeAndre Jordan will fit. It fits their length and defense first mentality. The Bucks are trying to go all length. They want lengthy players. They want players who can play some good defense. And he's low usage to put next to Giannis, so he will be a great fit in Milwaukee. But I just feel like if the Clippers, which they should, ask for a young stud in either Malcolm Brogdon or Thon Maker, I don't think the Bucks are going to be willing to part ways with one of those two guys. And finally, it feels like the Timberwolves are the last option. I feel are in the most need of DeAndre Jordan right now because they are 17th defensively and are in desperate need of a rim protector or someone who can play defense on that damn team. The problem for the Timberwolves is creating a deal that can match financially without giving up too many assets. They have many players like Towns who are still on low salaries, which makes it so difficult to come up with a trade that can work. So there's just so many problems right now for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But if they are willing to, maybe if the Clippers can give them maybe can let them slide away with the under the radar offer, maybe it might work out. But I don't know how you're going to make a deal that will work for the Timberwolves. So that basically rules them out. But overall, man, to me it's clear the Clippers need to blow their team up. The best start is to trade DeAndre Jordan and maybe even fire Doc Rivers. Like, if you guys listen to my YouTube exclusive that I made on David Fizdale being fired, I suggested that if Doc Rivers gets fired by the Clippers, David Fizdale should come in and help this team rebuild, because there's no better person, in my opinion, that works well with young players than David Fizdale. So I feel that we can bring David Fizdale in and hopefully revitalize this team. But it all starts with trading DeAndre Jordan. Now, obviously, I mentioned all the 4 teams that are interested, and to be honest with you, there really isn't a best fit right now. Maybe near the trade deadline, things may be a little more clearer as to where he can go and what teams are willing to let go of what pieces. But right now, it's really, really unclear where DeAndre Jordan will land. There's a lot of possible destinations. He will help a lot of teams, but right now, we just gotta play the waiting game and see where DeAndre Jordan will end up going forward. But I'll keep you guys updated and we'll see what happens.